Hello everyone, hi, welcome to today's event in partnership with Reuben Sinclair on the race for talent. My name is Koray Camgöz. I'm the Director of Communications and Marketing at the PRCA. Thank you all very much for joining us. So the kind of premise for this event really began with an ebook which we published in partnership with Reuben Sinclair last week, which looks at all facets of the race for talent. And it's really designed to help agencies and in-house teams perfect their recruitment strategy in what is broadly recognized as a candidate-led market. So if you haven't already downloaded the guide, please do. You can check that out on our website, and I'm sure Rohan will also share some links and we can pop some into the chat here. But essentially it's a 14-page step-by-step guide which equips employers with the practical tools to attract and retain the best talent and overcome the common recruitment challenges. And those are some of the things that we're going to be touching on today. The guide challenges the PR and communications industry to reimagine its employee value proposition, or EVP, by moving away from competitive salaries and job titles as the surefire way to secure talent, towards cultivating an environment that powers both professional and personal growth. So that's a little bit about the ebook. Please do download it and do make use of it. And we're going to use that as a kind of basis for today's discussion. And I'm really pleased today to be joined by two experts in the recruitment space. We have Rohan Shah, who's co-founder and managing partner at Reuben Sinclair, and Marcia, who is head of HR for communications. So it's great to have both the agency and the in-house side of recruitment reflected today. So without further ado, I'll just a quick bit of housekeeping. If you do have any questions for either Rohan or Marcia, please do use the Q&A function, which you can find at the bottom of the screen. I think someone's already, Michael has helpfully already added the link to the ebook in the Q&A function, so you can check that out there. But yeah, do please populate that box with any questions that you have for either Rohan or Marcia. We're going to run this for around about 40 to 45 minutes. It will be recorded, so do please bear that in mind. It will be made available on our YouTube channel, so if you've got any colleagues or others who'd be interested in watching it back, please feel free to let them know that they can catch up on demand. Cool, so we'll jump right into it. And Rohan, perhaps if I can start with you. I mean,
Sure.
Without kind of going too much into the nitty-gritty of the book, if we could just take a step back and think about the current state of the recruitment market in the communications industry. We hear a lot about how it's really an unprecedented time to recruit in comms. So what's the state of the landscape from where you're sitting? What are the kind of key trends in the current market for you?
Yeah, thanks Koray, thanks for organising this, and Marcia, thank you for joining us as well. So for me, the current landscape, there are two parts to this, I think. So what fundamentally it's what we're seeing with candidates, and then what we're also seeing with employers. But particularly it's the effect that the pandemic has actually had on both. So for candidates, there were three key changes that we noticed that throughout well, certainly since the pandemic hit us, but we're still seeing them today. And my belief is that they are genuinely going to be here to stay. Number one is increased flexibility. So no longer are they wanting to have work interfere with their personal priorities. In fact, what they want is to be able to carry out personal priorities whilst also working. Meaningful work is the second thing. No longer is a 5K increase going to cut it. They now want some meaning behind the work that they do, a genuine purpose. And then the final thing, of course, is still strong compensation with the cost of living going up. People are still looking at strong compensation also being at the forefront, but also with health and well-being very much at the forefront. For clients, things are slightly different. I think for clients, we're certainly seeing rapidly increasing salaries and certainly demands from candidates on that. So since our salary survey at the beginning of this year, we're seeing a genuine increase of around 8 to 10% across all salary levels, from AE through to SAD and across most sectors. I think the good news for the industry is that this indicates that the PR industry is actually ahead of general wage rises, which actually the ONS reported grew at around a rate of like 5.4%. I think it was from June to the August period. Rapid rate of progression is the next thing we're seeing. So for example, an account manager last year would typically have circa 3 years experience. Today, we're seeing individuals being promoted to AM within 1.5 years. You know, cost of living, energy prices, retention and career development are probably the main motivating factors behind certainly the salary rises and the rapid rate of progression. And then finally, there's a genuine skills gap and talent shortage. And actually, Brexit has, Brexit has created a shortage within the sector. It's created a short talent supply, but also the pandemic very likely had a bigger effect than we think in relation to people actually leaving the industry altogether. So a recent global survey by McKinsey found that 65% of people who quit their jobs in the past 2 years are not actually returning to the industries that they left, or they didn't return to the industries that they left. And so we must start looking to attract talent from other industries to address the skill gap. So that's kind of what I'm seeing candidate side and employer side. That's
great to hear. And there's a lot to unpack there, and certainly agree with your point about inspiring a new generation. I mean, the industry has long had conversations with itself about the need to inspire a new and generation of professionals from different backgrounds, and I feel like there's never been a more clear and urgent need for that, given the fact that we have this crisis where people have left and there's a massive shortage of talent. Marcia, what about you? What are you seeing from your point of view? Does that resonate on the in-house side as well?
Yeah, some of it definitely does, because we have candidates coming in asking for a lot of money, doing the same level of job as somebody who's already in the business, and that causes us other ripple effects, because we then have to uplift people within the business and to match the. So it's a big issue, and we know that not Rohan and his team, but other recruiters sometimes encourage people who may not be suitable for the role to go for it, go for the extra money, which obviously gets their fees up. So we've seen that ourselves here at Four as well. So yeah, it's a minefield, and yeah. It
very much feels like that, and it's something that we've heard of as well, where perhaps people are being put forward for roles that they might not necessarily be qualified or prepared for, but there is such desperation amongst those who are recruitment that often people are given the chance, and then ultimately that might not work out in the way that it's intended.
No.
Yeah, I think, sorry to interrupt, I think it is really interesting. I think candidates certainly over the last 2 years have very much been in the driving seat around what they actually want to be going forward for. And I think certainly, I mean, absolutely, Marcia, I probably agree that there are some recruiters out there who are probably pushing, I guess, trying to push the envelope a little bit more on certain individuals. But I do think, candidates certainly in the last 2 years have been very much in the driving seat, given the shortage of talent. They've really been able to have a choose or a pick of which companies they want to be applying for, which companies they want to interview for. For every one candidate now that's actively sort of looking, there seems to be 3, 4, 5 opportunities. So they're not short of opportunities at the moment.
That's interesting to hear. And when we talk about the current landscape, and there's obviously a need for people to evolve the way that they're recruiting, or for organizations to mature in their approach. What, in this current landscape, what do you think are the secrets for success on the organization side? Do you have any tips that you can share with people for attracting the very best people in our industry?
I think having a track record of being a positive and inclusive organisation is really important. I think when people look for jobs, it's not just about the job and the salary. It's like, who am I actually working for? Are they, a reputable organisation? Are they various little things? So we've not long been awarded the B Corp, which is a big thing for us, and we think will be an attraction tool for people to join us, to know that we are a community, diverse-led organisation, and we just want to do good things. I think flexible working, which is what Ryan said, that all all the candidates are looking for. We are still offering flexible working at 4. I know some businesses have gone slightly backwards and making staff come in 2 days a week or 3 days a week. We're still fully flexible at 4 communications, so that's good. And which I think is another attraction for people. And I think we need to be, as an industry, a bit more open to transferable skills for more senior people coming into the industry, who we would probably have overlooked in the past. Because we've got this shortage, we need to be a bit more open-minded about who we let in through the door, to get the right people in our industry. I think that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing, and we're hoping it's working.
Rohan?
Yeah, I think Marcia is doing some great stuff there, and I think B Corp certainly gives a purpose. It drives a purpose, and it goes kind of just beyond coming into work and doing your job. It actually genuinely helps people, planet, and the business. So, but for me, I've written down there are 4 things for me. First and foremost, I think it's really important, certainly when you're looking to attract candidates in the market, it's very important to understand employee personas within your business, but then also the employee personas that you're looking to attract as well within your business. So, for example, some studies mentioned earlier by McKinsey, they found that there are now 5 different personas within the workplace. So you've got the traditionalists, you've got caregivers, you've got do-it-yourselfers, you've got the idealists, and you've got the relaxers. Now, it's possible to appeal to all personas, but you have to know what these personas are all seeking, and then you need to look to intrinsically build these within your overall employee value proposition. I think the second thing is the employee value proposition, which fundamentally answers the question, why should I work for your company over anywhere else? Companies today are still very much relying on quite traditional mechanisms to attract talent, things like salary, benefit, employee progression, internal culture, etc. But things like Marcia mentioned that go above that is really where you need to be. The things that I mentioned that the traditionalists look for, that's all well and good for a group, like I mentioned, called the traditionalists. But I think we now need to look at how we appeal to the 4 other groups. And for me, there's now an absolute need to humanize your EVP. So essentially, employees want to be seen as people and not just workers. And so it no longer comes through this work-life balance, but actually, in my belief, it's a work-life blend. So they're not separate, they're rather one and the same. And finally, it's that value that comes through feelings that drive an emotional response, and it's not just features and benefits. People want a person-first understanding. The 4th thing, and finally, it's the employer brand and the brand values. And I think in the UK, we're pretty bad at banging our own drum, but absolutely we must as organizations. When you live true to your employee value proposition, when you live true to your values, shout out loud, shout out really proud across all the social channels, show people that you are genuinely offering what you say you're offering, and your employees are benefiting from that. It all goes a long way, certainly when people are researching your company, deciding whether they want to apply for a role with you or not.
Yeah, I think there's a number of really good points there. I definitely identify with work-life blend rather than kind of work-life balance. And I think a lot of it's really interesting hearing you talk about different groups, because we're in a situation now where, as you mentioned, you've got lots of different personas within an organization, and increasingly a broader range of age demographics, more so than at any point previously, all with really radical differences and opinions on what they expect from life and work. And so managing that from an employer perspective is a real challenge. But it makes kind of nailing your EVP even more important. So plays to your point quite well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there are pros and cons to this work-life blend versus work-life balance. I mean, work-life balance very much says, look, we will offer you flexibility, but when you are working, you have to work. You can't do anything but work. But we'll give you all of this flexibility outside of that, or you can finish early and you can start later. But actually, a work-life blend means if I need to pop out to go and drop my kid to after school club, that's fine. You can go and do that because you're not bound by working at this time. And you just finish your work when it's done. And so I think that's the difference between work-life blend, is being able to fulfill, commit to and achieve your personal priorities whilst also getting your work done. And I think that's since pandemic.
Absolutely. And Marcia, is that how does that play out at Full Communications? I mean, you mentioned that you're a flexible organisation in terms of allowing staff to work where they want, but how does that blend play out from your point of view?
It works really great. So we've got lots of people who have got caring responsibilities, whether it be children or parents. So they're able to do what they need to do. So all we ask is that people let someone know, I'm going to be offline between X and Y time because I'm on the school run, or I'm walking the dog, or I'm doing this. We're really relaxed. We unless there's a specific deadline or a client need, you don't actually need to be online from 9 to 5:30. You can do your 7.5 hours at any point, split or broken or all together during the day. We're trusting the staff to do that, and they managed to do it through the pandemic. So, and our productivity went through the roof. So why would we change that now? So yeah, so we've been really, really super flexible with staff, which is we have attracted certain types of people a little bit older, with children in maybe junior school rather than primary, who still want to be around for school runs, but the children are quite independent. The parents of those children have come and joined us and said, I've come to you because I'm able to do this thing. I'm able to drop little Sammy off to football or whatever. I'm able to do the thing because you're giving me the flexibility to do that and the license to do that. And that's what we want, because we know that happy staff will get their job done.
Absolutely, and better for business, right?
Absolutely.
So thinking about the hiring process now, so if you both shared some really good advice for how to attract candidates in the first place, but once that hiring process begins, what would you say, and Rohan, perhaps if I start with you on this one and then I'll come to you, Marcia, what would you say are the pitfalls that organizations can fall into during the hiring process? Is there anything kind of that you would flag as a do or a don't?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's quite a long list here. I think I'll start. So I think that there are probably 4 or 5 that would stick out. I think that would be really good do's and don'ts, or what pitfalls might be. So the first one are just genuinely bad experiences for candidates. So, for example, the interviewer was not prepared or trained on how to interview effectively and fairly. Always the do's here are always ensure the interviewer is fully prepared, make sure that they have read the CV and they're fully aware of the person that they're interviewing. Have they done their research on that individual? But also, do they have a list of questions ready to assess the candidate, a list of fair questions to assess the candidate? So people have had bad experiences from just really bad interviewing processes. The next one is, I guess, a follow-on from that. It's sort of rushed interview. So we've had candidates sometimes go in and it's been 15 candidates have really, the employers have really liked the candidates after this interview, but the candidates haven't, and that's because it's been a rushed interview, 15 or 20 minutes, and then the client has wrapped it up. This takes away any value for the candidate generally. It just shows that the time of the employer is more important than the time of the candidate. And I think candidates expect around 45 minutes generally as a minimum. So I think here is, I appreciate sometimes you might be interviewing a candidate and you both agree it's not right for whatever reason. I think if you both agree it's right, it's not right, then agreement before wrapping up the interview early would be suggested. Otherwise, ensure the interviewer asks all of the questions that other candidates have also been asked, and that makes sure it ensures fairness. I think the next one would be employers maybe putting all their eggs into one basket. We've seen, unfortunately, with the way the market is at the moment, clients have really liked one candidate. They put all their eggs in the basket on that one candidate, and the candidate is accepted another opportunity. So always try and have more than one candidate at final stage if you can. Appreciate that might be a luxury right now. Next thing would be too long or too short an interview process. 4 interviews, generally too long. 1 interview can be certainly too short. So I would, and also reduce the hurdles that you get people to jump through. you know, so if you do set tasks, try to avoid timed tasks as well. You know, it's not school, and on most occasions, it's not how the real working environment operates, you know. So and always try to be aware of sort of neurodiverse applicants within the process if you are setting tasks. And then probably finally, always, and this is actually really important for me, always ensure that the interview process is a two-way street. So candidates today will want to interview you just as much as you are interviewing them. And for me, that's only right. So allow candidates to assess if your organization is the right place to work, and be sure to you know, to sell your organization back to the candidate. You know, show them that you are genuinely interested. You know, it will create excitement for the candidate. And if you don't do that, then other organizations will, and they are the ones who will likely, the candidates will probably accept offers with those companies that are doing that.
Yeah, that a number of really great points there, and you're quite right that especially in a candidate-led market, it's as much about them getting to know the organization as it is about the organization getting to grips with the candidate. So a good lesson to bear in mind. Marcia, what do you see as kind of the pitfalls and of recruitment? Obviously, maybe a little bit harder to talk about first-hand experience, but what would your advice be to people during that hiring process?
Oh, have we lost Marcia?
You may have lost Marcia. She's her screen has kind of switched off. Not to worry, I'm sure we will get her back shortly.
Because a good enough question, Koray.
Maybe that was it. It was such an impact. Or perhaps you answered it in the best way you could. Thankfully, we're actually getting a couple of questions in from the audience, which I'll come on to in just a moment. But before we move on to that, and yeah, we'll try and get Marcia back. But Rohan, if I could ask you about the onboarding process, right? So yeah, we've spoken a bit about what we do to attract candidates, things to look out for and maybe avoid during the hiring process. But once people are through the door, what do you see as kind of the key things for organizations to bear in mind? What gives organizations the best chance of retaining talent and making that appointment a success long term?
Yeah, I think this is a really important question, actually, Koray, because, you know, companies now have to work really hard to attract that talent. And once they get them in, you know, I think sometimes organizations can feel like that hard work is done. And it really isn't, because the retention piece now is so important, especially with, you know, Gartner saying and McKinsey saying that certainly over the course of the next 6 months. I mean, this was research that they did back in March, April time. They said over the next 6 months, you know, around 40% of the workforce will consider leaving their roles. So retention is an absolute critical point for employers at the moment, for organizations. So I think there are again 3 or 4 things here. So number one for me would be ensure that the right training and development plan and integration into the organization has been done at the onboarding process. Studies have shown that, you know, 40% of people are likely to leave a job in their first year if this isn't adequate. So it's a really important part of the onboarding process. I think throughout someone's life at an organization, leaders and managers must lead from the front in terms of so they've got to go beyond their direct reports in terms of communicating directly with members of the business. So don't just get managers or directors, particularly the leaders of the organization, to communicate with their direct reports, the senior people. Get them to go beyond them and actually speak with everyone within the organization. They should be looking at giving feedback, giving praise, giving recognition. This brings a personal touch and value to each person within the company. You know, even if people, this might only be 5 minutes of interaction, but it means something. You know, I think a lot of candidates have said that there's no greater turn-off to themselves than seeing their leaders of businesses locked behind closed doors all day, seemingly inaccessible and having sort of zero interaction with, or showing that they don't really truly value the people that make the business a success. So that's a really important part of retention. For me, I'd then also circle back to the employee personas and ensure that you're delivering to them accordingly. I think we talked about this earlier, but you've always got to aim to allow people to achieve their personal priorities and their personal commitments, you know, whilst also working. And I think now more than ever, it seems to be shifting from this work-life balance to this work-life blend. You know, like I said, that they're not separate, they're one and the same. You know, and I think you really need to be embracing that within your organization now. And that is what we call radical flexibility. And people are wanting this more than ever. And this will go a long way, an awfully long way, to retaining your employees, as they certainly feel incredibly valued if they're allowed that benefit. And then finally, circle back to your EVP. You know, to retain them, ensure that your employees recognise and ensure that you as an organisation are publishing the emotional responses to the value that your employees gain from from employment within the organisation. You know, it all comes back to this person first understanding. You know, remember that employees want to be seen as people, not just workers, and they are there to get the best from their life, not just for their organisation.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting to hear all those points. Marcia, great to have you back with us again.
I'm in the office, would you believe? It's not even the house internet. It's this. I'm in the office. Something went wrong just now. So I'm
just going to say, I'm not sure if you caught the question, but we were just asking about kind of once appointments are confirmed, what can organisations implement to ensure those appointments work long term and that retention is successful?
Yeah, and just slightly before that, one of the things that I was going to say with regard to the hiring process is that some businesses or some individuals rush to hire because they feel that they're not going to get another candidate or whatever, and they're hiring the wrong people. And I think that's something that we all need to be conscious of. With regard to after the contract's gone out, the person says they're joining on the 1st of next month, they're fantastic. I can only tell you what we do at 4. At 4, they get a brochure about the organisation, an electronic brochure about the organisation. They have access to our intranet site called Together, so they can look up other things on there prior to them even coming if they wish. And yes, there are inductions, various different levels of inductions for different elements. Or they'll be given a learning path on LinkedIn Learning. So there are various different things that we try to make sure that people feel welcome once they've accepted the role. We also have staff-led groups. So we've got a LGBT group, a race equality group, gender equality group, and an environmental group called For Earth. And so people are able to join that, and they can see historically the things that those groups have done, presented to the board, their budgets and things. So people can find something that fits in with what they're interested in, which is great. And then we have staff meetings where the 4 directors, the 4 partners of the organisation, are also in attendance and speak to individuals over a drink or whatever. It's not a thing. We don't have any offices. We only have meeting rooms. It's all open plan at 4. So nobody's hiding in an office. Everybody's sitting at a desk. You could be sat next to the chief executive, or you could be sat next to Marcia. It's very kind of level playing field in that sense. So we think those types of things make people feel welcome and feel that there's something that they can do when they get here, something they can be involved in. And I think those types of things encourage people to stay. Not everyone, but those types of things encourage people to stay at an organisation. I can't go because we're in the middle of the football league and the football team's playing, you know, so it's all these different things that we offer here that not to say we've got a great, like super great retention rate. We're still suffering like everyone else. And the other thing I just want to point out on retention is that we need to be careful and not beat ourselves up too much, because nobody left for 2.5 years and then suddenly everybody left. So it's not, it might be a culmination of people going what would have gone in the last 2.5 years. It just felt like everybody left at the same time. And I just don't want us all beating ourselves up in the industry about them all leaving.
Yeah, you're quite right. A lot of the trends which dictate that are beyond the industry's control. Yeah. And I think Rohan alluded to it at the beginning when he was talking about the fact that we've had a situation where older people have left the workforce, and that's not a public relations problem, although admittedly the industry doesn't do enough to deal with issues around age discrimination, but these are kind of generic, broad macro trends. We've had some really good questions come in on the Q&A feed. One of them crosses over slightly with what you were just talking about, Marcia, and it's asked by Michael, who says, big factors like agency, values, culture, etc. are obviously important, but do the soft perks still matter? So things like breakfast, gym membership, early Friday finish. Yeah, Marcia, do they still count?
They definitely do. So cycle to work, gym membership, online GP service, breakfast. We have breakfast and fruit available to everyone all day with every combination of milk you can think of. So those things are still super important, especially now where it's getting colder. More people are likely to be in the office to use the office heating as opposed to the heating at their house. And there is food here available for them to eat. So people you wouldn't come to the office and start step if you had no money in your pocket. You'd be able to consume something. And those things are really, really important. Absolutely.
Yeah, look, they definitely have, I think they are important. There is a danger though with things that are very soft perks like breakfast, gym membership, early Friday, and the danger is that people don't use them. So if they're not being used, it's not a benefit, it's just a feature. It's just there, it's not being used, it has no benefit at all to an individual that doesn't want to use that. And so what we're working with clients a lot more on is, and this is a lot easier said than done and probably a little bit easier for smaller agile businesses, but it's looking to personalize and really tailor benefit directly to each individual employee. And all of a sudden you'll see the usage go up and you'll see the level of value that is felt from those employees go up. So I think as long as they're being used, there's a place for them.
I think that's a really good point, because you could have a whole organization of people who don't enjoy going to the gym, right? And it's just.
Do you know what? I think it also falls into health and well-being. So actually, Gartner, they asked, I think globally, about 70, 80 odd HR managers, and they put a phrase to them, and they said, would you agree or disagree that people within the organization aren't using their health and well-being benefits because they don't know what they need? And 4%, only 4% disagreed. So actually what they were saying is, it may very well be that employees don't actually know what they do need, and it's important that organizations help educate and help instill an understanding of what they might need, but then once they've given that education, really encouraging them to then use that and follow through with it. So, I think a lot of this also falls down to an education piece. If you are offering gym membership, why are you offering it? Why is it good for each individual employee? Help them understand, help them to buy into it, and then obviously encourage them to use it.
Absolutely. Conscious of time, so I want to try and squeeze in a couple of questions which we've also had from the audience. Claire Pabler asks about Glassdoor. And she asks, what do you think the challenge is in managing anonymous or named Glassdoor reviews, or even Google reviews, where people deliver warts and all tales of working for PR organizations and tales about the true leadership style behind the spin? Rohan, I'll start with you and then perhaps share your thoughts.
Yeah, look, I might have a very, very different answer here to Marcia, but I mean, that's a big question. It's a great question. So what do you think the challenge is in managing, named Glassdoor reviews or even Google reviews where people deliver? Okay, so there is a challenge in that the reality is people are more likely to go and leave a review if they've had a bad experience. And actually, the secret to managing this is exactly that. You have to manage it. You can't just expect it to manage itself. Otherwise, it's going to be filled with stuff or tales that you might not necessarily want on there as an organization. So, for example, when you have good leavers in the organization, which hopefully is a majority of them, ask them to leave a Glassdoor review. Genuinely manage that process and ask them, would you be happy to go on and leave us a Glassdoor review as part of this offboarding process? when you have people in the interview process, at the end of the interview process, whether they've been offered the role or not, ask them for feedback on the interview process. It keeps you accountable as an organisation to make sure you've got a good process for starters, but then you're also encouraging people to go and leave good reviews around it. And then, of course, your existing employees, if they haven't left a Glassdoor review, why not? Ask them to leave a review. Certainly, if good things have happened within the organisation, encourage existing employees to leave it. They can at any point go on and change it. So if they change their mind and you've done something bad as an organisation, they are free to change that view. So there's nothing wrong. You're not forcing people to do that. You are asking. They are free to change that down the line. And so I think it's a really good question by Claire, and I think the challenge in managing it is not managing it fundamentally. If you don't do that, then it's probably not great.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Yes. So yes, Glassdoor, interesting. So yes, we like many other agencies have had some negative reviews, but we also genuinely ask people to leave reviews at various stages throughout their career. It's not necessarily at joining or leaving. We definitely ask when they join, sometimes when they leave, but usually whilst they're still here, it will be announced in a staff meeting or so. If you feel you want to put something up on Glassdoor. So yes, you're quite right, Rohan. It needs to be managed. It's not something you can ignore and pretend it didn't happen, because that's really bad. And yes, people will leave negative reviews. And on one occasion, we had somebody who wasn't even a real person, because we had Glassdoor investigate and it wasn't even a real person. So yeah, you've got to keep your eye on what's going on your Glassdoor accounts, guys.
Yeah, good advice. I think being proactive about it, right, and not just panicking when the review comes, and being proactive in talking to staff.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think it's also, the employer have the option to respond to each review, and I think it's really important you do respond to each review. And if there is a sniff of something being true, and they're cutting behind the nonsense that people might say, oh, we're so great, but actually it's not great. Own up and say, look, actually, yeah, do you know what? We've taken this feedback on board and it's fine. Then starts talking about what you're doing to address those issues. And actually, that review suddenly goes away when you start talking about what you're doing to address it. People feel a little bit more comfortable with it. So, respond to each review, whether good or bad. If it's not believable, then say that it's not believable and give reasons why. If it is believable, to say what you're doing to address it. And if it's a good review, then thank the person kindly.
Good advice. Okay, I'm going to push you both for time for quick answers to these last two questions. Laura Cox asks about regional variation. So we've spoken a lot about the trends which are taking place, and obviously being a candidate-led market and much of the conversation relates to London. But do either of you have any opinions on variations across the UK? Are the trends consistent everywhere? Are there any differences we need to be aware of?
We've got offices in Sheffield and in Wales, and we haven't seen anywhere near the level of turnover as there is down in London. So it's like a completely different place, nowhere near the level of turnover. I can't even begin to explain it to you. So yeah, they are smaller offices, and so maybe it could be that they're more because there's 250 of us in London, so that the offices in Wales and Sheffield may feel more tight knit, and so people might feel a different way about their community in their work life. But there is nowhere near the same level of turnover, so we're not seeing anywhere near any of the drastic situation that's going on in London happening in Sheffield or Wales.
That's really interesting. Right, what about?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, Marcia, because actually I think the interesting thing that we're seeing is that previously, pre-pandemic, 80% of opportunities were in London, and reality is you had to be based in London to be relevant for those opportunities. Now, a lot more people have moved outside of London, a lot more roles are remote, and so actually options have really opened up for people in the regions, because no longer do you have to be in London. You can work for a London-based organisation from Wales, you can work from Leeds or from Manchester. So it has opened up a lot of opportunities. So it's really interesting to hear the retention's been good there, Marcia. That's a really good thing for your organisation. I think the challenge is that the businesses in the regions are now having to compete with the London salaries. That's the difference, because, you know, some organisations in London are saying, well, that's fine, we'll pay someone in the Midlands, we'll pay them the London salary because they're going to be doing the same job, they're working remotely, etc., etc. So look, we're starting to see that happen a little bit more. I don't think it's necessarily happened entirely yet, but I think that's a challenge that businesses, certainly in the regions, must be aware of.
That's interesting, Ryan, and it crosses over with the final question as well, which came in from Michael on our team about entry-level salaries. So obviously we've got a situation where there's been a lot of conversation for a number of years really about how entry-level salaries just are nowhere near high enough to support people who are often, you know, often young people, often people living in flat share or in city centres where the cost of living is sky high. What's your thoughts on it? How do you see it playing out? Do you think it's, yeah, do you expect that situation to remain the same? And what advice would you have for organisations who are thinking about entry-level salaries?
From my perspective, I think this really comes down to the education within each organisation about equity. I think is really, really important, because just because you might have an AE on, you know, you pay 25k, someone with a certain socioeconomic background that maybe has caring responsibilities for their mother or for their father, say, you know, for example, we had a candidate who needed an extra 2 or 3k to assist with her caring responsibilities for her parents. Now, you know, equity is all about giving the individual what they need to be on a level playing field with everybody else. And actually, you know, if organisations are very worried about saying, well, we pay this amount, and so we can't go above this amount, otherwise everyone internally will be very, very disappointed, or they might leave. Well, actually, the education piece around equity, and I think until we really start to push that within organisations, I think there is going to be a struggle for organisations to start paying the salaries that are needed at the lower level. We are seeing it increase, but I think it's increased just generally because the rise in salaries are going up. Is it on an equity basis? I'm not sure it is, and I think that needs to change.
I think you're right, and that would be something we would look at openly if it came to light that was the situation that you just used as an example. But yes, I think you're absolutely right. It is something that needs to be looked at on equity level, not just as a bog standard. All grads are on X amount. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
Great. Well, we're almost at the end. Before I let you both go, and it's been a great discussion. I really enjoyed it. Thanks very much for your time. If just if you could just summarise in a sentence or two, thinking ahead to 2023, if you're hiring a candidate in 2023, what is the one thing that you need to bear in mind? Marcia, can I ask you that first?
I will say, make sure you get references. I think people are forgetting the old school ways. You need that. You need a basis to work on. You need something. Make sure you know who you're hiring. Yeah, that's what I would say. Make sure you know who you're hiring.
An old school one, but a very, very valid recommendation. Rohan, what about you?
Yeah, for me, I think we need to start considering aligning individuals' personal priorities and commitments with the goals of the organisation. And if your business can't allow them to commit to those priorities, then don't hire them, because you'd be doing them a disservice. And it would be vice versa. If they didn't help achieve your company goals, then obviously you wouldn't hire them. So it needs to go both ways. Brilliant.
And of course, as I mentioned at the top of the organisation, you can find out loads more information about tips and advice in the ebook, which is put together by Reuben Sinclair. Rohan, where can people find that?
The ebook, if they go onto our website, it's just at the bottom over there. They can simply go straight through to a form, download the copy, and they'll get it immediately.
Perfect. All right. I
think also Michael has put a link in as well. In the chat.
Yes, good point. He's thrown that in the Q&A box as well. So do check that out as well. Cool. I think that brings us to a close. Marcia and Rohan, thank you both very much. Really enjoyed the discussion. Took loads away from that, and I'm sure everyone else joining did too. Just a quick reminder, as I mentioned at the top, this will be available on our YouTube channel in the next few days, so keep an eye on that and feel free to share it with any colleagues you think might be interested in it. But apart from that, all that remains is for me to wish you a nice afternoon. Enjoy the football if you're watching it, and we will welcome you to the PRCA event again soon. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thanks, Koray. Thanks, Marcia.
Bye. Thanks. Bye.